rotisserie-style chicken with a flavor upgrade, mizzled with honey mustard on hearty multigrain bread, and topped with fresh hand-sliced veggies. Craving some heat? The Baja Turkey Avocado hits all the hot notes. Oven-roasted turkey stacked high on hearty multigrain smeared with smashed avocado and drizzled with the piquant chipotle sauce. Tuck into new subs to savor at Subway. Eat fresh.
Guam Auto Spot has the best selection in Buick, GMC, Mitsubishi, and used cars like the 2021 Mitsubishi Mirage starting at $127 per paycheck. Zero down. Call 671-478-AUTO to take a test drive or get pre-approved online at GuamAutospot.com.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of our free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. What a great way to start a week. A respectful recitation of the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution. And I've got, let's see, it's 4:07:36. That means I've got about 9 hours and 54 minutes to go on Tall Tales here. It couldn't be any better than that. So I'm having a little trouble getting my Facebook up and running here right now. But, well, Jose's working on that. I'm going to go straight to Zemi Ikutni. And today we've got some new contestants in Zemi Ikutni because the folks whose job it is don't seem to be very interested anymore. We start out with the Daily News. Our view, bus system needs improvements, not marketing. The island's public transit system is a perennial problem. Strides in this arena are often touted in announcements with potential grants for electric sedans or lofty proposals of air-conditioned bus depots and park and ride facilities. But are new cars and depots enough to improve public transportation for those who need it most? Now, I'm going to stop right there, and I'm going to go through the same thing that I always go through, and maybe someday, through sheer dint of stick-to-itiveness, someone will pay attention. You can't build a bus system based on the ability to pay of those who need it the most. If we had a real bus system, then we could provide really inexpensive, maybe even free transportation for those who need it the most. But to say we're going to build a system that will operate only for those people who can't afford anything other than the bus is delusional. It just can't work unless you want to pour huge amounts of money into it. And my analysis of that is if that's what you want to do, skip the bus system, skip the infrastructure, skip the administrative costs, just allow somebody over at Public Health and Social Services to do a means test and issue passes or tickets to folks who really need the transportation and reimburse cab fare. And it would be better and it would be cheaper. But to have a huge bus system and then say, well, you know, there are a lot of people who just can't get around if they don't have the bus system. It's not going to work. I've mentioned this before. If we had a real bus system back during the days when I was working in Agania, I'd have walked down to Marine Corps Drive. If I know that a bus was coming every 15 minutes, it would have got me to Agania in 20 or 25 minutes. I'd have taken the bus. It would have saved me a lot of money, and more important, I would have gained almost an hour every day in work time. I could read, study, do all kinds of things on the bus instead of drive and listen to my radio. But until we have that kind of a system, then we might just as well reimburse cab fare or make a deal with this the local equivalent of Lyft and Uber that's called Skoll, and let folks who really need a transportation ride that and reimburse the fare. But that would require doing something that we haven't done before. We would require a little bit of critical thinking, which is absolutely forbidden in government circles.
No, you had it right the first time. The circus.
The government circus, yeah. So then the editorial poses the rhetorical question: can our mass transit system provide riders safe, reliable, and dignified ways to get to work, meetings, and appointments on time? What's this dignified? What? So we can't allow them to just ride in Chevrolet buses. We've got to go out and buy Cadillac buses so that they can ride to work in a dignified manner. All right, Daily News, where do you get this stuff? Going back to the editorial, the University of Guam's Global Learning and Engagement Department proposed... No, let me repeat that. The University of Guam's Global Learning and Engagement Department. We have that at the university? Yeah, no wonder we're doing so well. They proposed a public relations partnership with the Guam Regional Transit Authority to rebrand the agency and its services. In short, the proposal is a marketing campaign to provide authority with social media account management and marketing materials, according to the university's recent presentation. Although the university's marketing proposal is fine, it's akin to putting the cart before the horse, or in this case, pretty logos before the bus. We urge more focus on actual transportation system and how it can better serve riders, whether they live in Central Village or hard-to-access tertiary roads lacking proper signage. Meaningful mass transit improvements will require experts in public policy, urban and rural planning, and large-scale public transportation. I think they're talking about the mayor's council there, Jose. Where's my horn? Yeah, let me try that again. Meaningful mass transit improvements will require experts in public policy, urban and rural planning, and large-scale public transportation. Sounds like the mayor's council. Fix the system, then make it pretty later. We need knowledgeable planners to incorporate the logistics of local roads as they relate to larger highway systems connecting Jigo to Malesu, Hagåtña to Manilao, and Haga to Talofo. Our most underserved and disadvantaged populations live in substandard housing on largely undeveloped land. Many of them lack internet services and aren't active on social media. They don't need a logo or marketing outreach. They need a reliable work to the job center or their jobs. Accessing these riders requires traversing near impassable roadways that are far from important village commerce areas like stores, mayor's offices, or centralized bus stop locations. Let's make mass transit accessible, safe, and reliable. I guess we forgot about dignified here. Before worrying about developing marketing strategies and increasing global, as you were Guam Regional Transit Authority, social media following. Now, I hope that there's a rebuttal here from the University of Guam's Global Learning and Engagement Department, because that sounds like it's really, really important. And there must be some really smart dudes out there in that outfit.
It was probably a federal grant.
No doubt, yeah. And therefore, it doesn't need to make any sense, doesn't mean to be useful, practical, doesn't need to have any value whatsoever. But, well, we got a federal grant for it, so...
We got to fulfill something.
Yeah, we got to do it.
We've already run out of tsunami signs.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I had a visitor over here about, I think it was 2009, and, you know, he never mentioned the signs, but they were everywhere, you know. And he said, does Guam have a history of tsunamis, Bob? And I said, no. I think the last one was in 1890.
And that was at a river mouth or something like that?
Something like that.
It's still suspect.
Yeah, and I said, we've only had one death from a tsunami. That's when we issued a bogus warning. Somebody got killed in a traffic accident. But by God, we had those signs everywhere, didn't we?
Yeah, this path, this way to safety.
Yeah.
Well, we never met a federal grant we never loved.
Exactly. Yeah, well, you can hire more employees that way, see? So, okay, so I've got a couple real editorials here. Yeah, and you know they're real because it wasn't put out by the editorial board of either newspapers. I've got one from Helen Middlebrook and one from Troy. So I'm going to start out with Helen. Helen says, and she had to run this as a letter to the editor. I don't know why her column ran every day that it's supposed to run, but this ran as a letter to the editor rather than her regular column. And this is what she said. I have been ignoring the elephant in the news hole for several months. Now, that sounds kind of like something I'd say, so that's pretty good, Ellen. Good start. But it's really getting tight in here. So, as one of the older journalists on the island, let me offer some advice to my colleagues. Stop it! That's the way it reads. Just stop it. Stop the 48 and 60-point bold headlines. Stop the, quote, death tolls. Stop the fear-mongering. We have had enough. After 2 years of parroting the narrative, it's time to step back to look at the effects of incomplete reporting and reckless editing. Whoa, no wonder they didn't want to run this as an editorial. Case in point. Well, you can't get after the Post for their editorials anymore because there aren't none. Case in point, a headline last week screamed, quote, Omicron surge deadly for unvaccinated Manamku. Yet nothing in the story actually supported that conclusion. It's a good headline, though. And in fact, the prior 2 days' stories about the most recent 9 deaths, numbers 286 through 294, reported that 7 were vaccinated and 2 were not. But that's not part of the narrative. That's not part of the red rice game, Helen. The narrative is unvaccinated, you're going to die. Those stories would lead a reader to a different conclusion, that the vaccine is not effective and that underlying conditions in old age are greater factors than vaccine status. So if we had public health officials and our governor say this, if you're overweight, if you're diabetic, if you're a couch potato, if you're a smoker, if you're a drinker, stop. Because everybody's going to die, but you're going to die a lot sooner than you and your family will want you to. And as far as Wuhan virus is concerned, you are the guys that are really susceptible. But no one would do that, certainly not the governor. You know why, Jose? Might hurt somebody's feelings. Yeah. So the stories on deaths 286 to 294 raise other questions. Of the 9 who were dead on arrival, 6 tested positive upon arrival. 1 tested positive the day after death. Boy, that virus is so contagious. Even dead people can get it. 1 tested positive about a month before death and 1 6 days before death. With 7 positive deaths, with 7 positive tests, apparently after death, the question is, does a posthumous PCR test for COVID-19 always come out positive? And if so, why? I can hear it now. Oh, this guy's dead over here. Do the test and mark it positive. He must have died of Wuhan virus. Try these questions. Why are PCR and positive patients and GMH only allowed to be given remdesivir, a drug that is under emergency use authorization for suspected viral pneumonia? Why are patients not given a full informed consent document about remdesivir remdesivir, yeah, before it is added to their treatment plan. Under Title 21 U.S.C. of the Federal Food and Drug Cosmetic Act, EUA drugs cannot be administered without individual consent, except at the hospital.
And a mandate.
Are the hospitals receiving federal money for reported Wuhan virus cases, deaths, ventilator use, and severe treatments? If so, how much? The questions keep coming. The reporting has not changed in the last 2 years, even though the narrative is actually changing around the world. It's time to write the stories that will get to the root of the matter, because the only way to kill the elephant is one bullet of truth at a time. Great editorial. Great editorial.
I can see the doctors on Guam smirking right now.
Yeah. And her criticism is similar to some of the criticisms that I have echoed concerning reporting in general. The idea is take the press release, run with the press release, even if it doesn't make any sense.
And without context.
And without any context, go for it anyhow.
But you know what's funny? This got to the Guam Daily Post so much that they came out of their shell and wrote an editorial right before the letter to the editor. Did you see that?
No, I didn't.
Editor's note. The Guam Daily Post notes that the issues raised have been covered in the 2 years of COVID-19 coverage, but we still did everything she told us stop doing anyways. Really?
Yeah.
Why is it that they don't do the editorial in front of other people's letters with such disinformation?
Yeah.
Why only Helen Middlebrooks?
Notes that the issue have been covered in the 2 years of Wuhan virus. Yeah, so obviously Helen is not talking about the Post. She's talking about everybody else.
Somebody else.
Yeah, like the Daily News. Yeah. Yeah, one time, well, I'll talk about that some other time. Now, there's a related story that I want to read into the record here that's not local, but it's a really good example of what Helen's talking about. And this one ran in PJ Media. It's by a guy named Rick Moran. The media blackout of Durham's bombshell report alleging Clinton campaign infiltrated Trump Tower. You know about
That's huge news.
Yeah, but you
Just
wouldn't.
as a department.
Yeah, you wouldn't.
Attorney.
You wouldn't know it unless you read the right stuff. If you just read the WAPO and the New York Times, you wouldn't know. A filing by special counsel John Durham alleging Hillary Clinton's 2016 presidential campaign paid a technology company to establish an inference that the Trump campaign was colluding with Russia so she could win an election has not generated much excitement in the mainstream media, about as much as Biden's son's briefcase. Yeah, perhaps because the story is somewhat complex, the media has decided not to report on it. Indeed, naming all the players and their actions is a chore. If you read the few media outlets on the right that are covering it, it's sort of boring until you realize the staggering implications of what's being alleged. Durham is saying that the Democrat candidate for president in 2016 engaged in a criminal conspiracy to infiltrate the opposition's most sensitive, compartmentalized information and try to manipulate data and information to politically damage her campaign. Well, what choice did she have? All the guys that did the Watergate break-in are dead. So she couldn't do an old-fashioned break-in. She got to do a cybersecurity break-in. Okay, then the editorial comment. Nothing to see here. Move along. CNN is full of stories about Donald Trump's clogged toilet, but nothing about the Dunham probe. The WAPO is equally silent, as are the New York Times and the Associated Press. Will these brave, courageous purveyors of truth cover the fact that Trump's special prosecutor, Robert Mueller, his name is not Mueller, it never has been, Trump's special prosecutor, Robert Mueller, was hoodwinked by these shenanigans? that Mueller was kept in the dark about the surveillance from which some of his, quote, evidence was obtained. Donald Trump was livid. Former President Trump reacted to the filing on Saturday evening, saying Durham filing provides indisputable evidence that my campaign and presidency were spied on by operatives paid by the Hillary Clinton campaign in an effort to develop a completely fabricated connection to Russia. This is a scandal far greater in scope and magnitude than Watergate, and those who were involved in and knew about this spying operation should be subject to criminal prosecution. Trump said, in a stronger period of time in our country, this crime would have been punishable by death. Trump added, in addition, reparations should be paid to those in our country who have been damaged by this. My PJ Media colleague Mark Margolis covered this story in detail yesterday, involving this quote from Kash Patel, lead GOP investigator on the House Intelligence Committee for the Trump-Russia pose. Here it is. The former chief investigator of the Trump-Russia investigation for House Intelligence Committee under Representative Devin Nunes told Fox News that the filing definitely shows that Hillary Clinton campaign directly funded and ordered its lawyers at Perkins Coie to orchestrate a criminal enterprise to fabricate a connection between President Trump and Russia. Per Durham, this arrangement was put in motion in July 2016, meaning the Hillary Clinton campaign and her lawyers masterminded the most intricate and coordinated conspiracy against Trump when he was both a candidate and later President of the United States, while simultaneously perpetuating the bogus Steele dossier hoax. Republicans can do nothing as long as they're in the minority. And even if they were to hold hearings after regaining the majority to get to the bottom of the swamp, this still wouldn't be news. For Democrats, it simply never happens because it won't be reported. This is especially true as long as Trump clogging up the White House toilets is repeated again as breaking news. So, more grave and national, but the same phenomenon that Helen is talking about, that the people who now call themselves journalists find a nice, comfortable narrative to crawl into, and that then becomes the news, regardless of what the facts and reality are. So 3 cheers for Helen. And we've got Troy, who also wrote an editorial today. Governor losing credibility on her hospital project. Governor Leon Guerrero's plan to build a new medical campus are becoming, well, shady. She started off on a roll. At the start of her term, she announced her intention to build a new hospital. Great. The pandemic hit, and she said it was ever more urgent to build a new facility. We absolutely agreed. Now you can tell that Troy is getting more and more comfortable writing editorials because he uses the editorial we. Then she got the legislature to approve bond financing for it. We supported it. And then she said she was going to build it at Eagle Field. What? Ms. Leon Guerrero has been losing public support and credibility for her idea since making that announcement. It was followed by the claims of people who used to own that land. The Navy condemned it back in 1950. Well, you know, he gets it right. People who used to own the land, not the ancestral owners or the people whose land was stolen and all this.
He is a listener.
He does. Then we found out that for whatever reason she wants to take 102 acres for this project. There has been a public outcry and even a strongly worded letter from Congressman Michael San Nicolas about the obvious circumvention of Guam law born from her desire to lease this land from the Navy rather than accept the Navy Secretary's offer to return the land. I don't know about that. Rather than conceding to reason and public doubt, the governor has instead dug in her heels on this issue. And for what? A hospital on the back road? Perhaps the worst part of the governor's plan is her admission Wednesday that development won't start for another couple years. What happened to the urgency of this project? This is making no sense to anyone. In fact, it does not even seem to be a priority of the people anymore, especially after 2 years of flip-flops and questionable actions by the governor in ignoring well-established land laws. A review of documents provided by her own office raised questions about the veracity of numerous public statements that she made about her plan. Although there already were more than enough reasons prior to her recent return from D.C. to question the credibility of anything she previously said about this hospital plan, her position taken in virtual press conference Wednesday raises serious doubts about the sincerity driving this plan. Leadership and diplomacy in government is an art. To be an effective leader, one must earn the respect of the people around them, especially colleagues in the same government whose input should be at least considered. Sadly, the governor has not demonstrated respect for the position of others, but has not once even taken a polite approach to agree to disagree. Instead, the governor has consistently referred to a new public community hospital as my hospital. Really bad choice of words. You know, it's the same thing that people, you know, when people talk in terms of my staff, not a good idea. My is not a very good word for government officials. I would never refer to my producer.
My?
Yeah, you're not my producer. You are the producer of Tall Tales.
Yes, sir.
And damn good at it, too, Jose.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah. But it's not her hospital, and she should not treat the decision-making process on what she has referred to as a billion-dollar investment as a unilateral one. After all, she would not have authority to finance such a feat had senators led by Vice Speaker Tina Rose Munya Barnes and Budget Chairman Joe San Augustine not provided the legislative authority for bond financing. Similarly, she can't enter into long-term leases and contracts without the approval of senators. And contrary to her public statements about federal funds, she needs to partner with Mike San Nicolas if she hopes to secure more federal resources. The governor herself and members of her task force have repeatedly used the figure $1 billion as the total cost for this medical campus. Common sense dictates that for even a project a fraction of this cost and magnitude, the success of any project requires cooperation, rational discussion, approval by tall tales, being sensitive to the likes of land claimants, and being sensitive to the commotion of the public. To date, the governor has not even hosted one public forum to hear the positions of the people. It's not the talk of the town that the governor may think it is since so many of her actions related to her plan have done behind closed doors. The governor likes closed doors for meeting with senators, for talks with public health about abortion. Been done behind closed doors with a select and small group of her cabinet that have no real estate development experience at all. Speaker Therese Terlahi not only held 2 oversight hearings that proved things were just not right for the governor trying to lease Eagle Fields for 100 years, but there appears to have been no effort made by the governor to address the concerns of the speaker and the 18 families whose land were condemned at and around Eagles Fields. In addition to the speaker, the governor ignored Mr. San Nicolas, who wrote to her expressing serious concerns about bypassing ancestral land claims. There we go. We got back to the narrative there. Why hasn't she replied? Not only would a response have been proper gesture of courtesy, but demonstrated some respect regardless of people in the same position can politely agree to disagree. And let's not forget what we believe to be not just a sign of disrespect, but a lack of diplomacy with respect to Rear Admiral Nicholson. While the governor was off island, Admiral Nicholson made public statements about the use of Eagle Field for a 360-degree island-wide missile defense system, and that the Navy still has much more studies to do required by law. Adelup commented shortly after that, admitting they were kept in the loop about such a possibility and that other sites have been under consideration for the medical campus. That seemed to be a reasonable response. For whatever reason, the governor came back to Guam, ignored the admiral's comments, said she's moving ahead with Eagles Field, and that she had cleared the matter with politicians in D.C. Wow. Governor, when you're out there screwing around, stay in your own lane. Yeah. Don't publicly contradict, probably the best friend you have in the military by saying something that is contrary to what he's told you and told everybody else. She went all that way and went through all that trouble to keep the land in the inventory of the federal government so she could build a medical campus in the worst possible place. And that's setting aside her insulting treatment of the Commander of Joint Region Marianas. It's not your hospital, Governor. It's not your money. It's not your land. It's not the least you could do. You've got a great idea and a wonderful vision to build this medical campus. Please consider this ludicrous plan of yours to build it on Eagles Field. Okay, so now I got to decide here, are there any blue stars in order? No question, Helen knocked the ball right out of the park. And Troy, it would be 2 blue stars except for one judgment call that you made. You had enough for a hard-hitting, really important editorial without getting into the 18 families. Not that that's not important, but it stands on its own bottom, and it's different from all of the other points that you're making. Were it not for that, this would have been one of those historic days when there would have been an award of 2 blue stars. For today, let's have a drum roll, Jose. A little louder, please.
It disappeared from me. Here we go.
And the winner is woman in the middle, Helen Whittlebrook. Congratulations, Helen. It's good to know that somebody over there in the Post Lash-Up knows how to write an editorial. Are you looking for a promotion? Okay, I got to take a short break, and when I come back, I've got our Carl. Wants to talk about Troy's editorial in the Durham bombshell.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point. Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
Do you have a car? Do you want to get rid of it? Yeah, yes. Yes, there are people. How did you know? Here's the deal. Take your used car to the guys over at Nissan Guam, and they're going to take a look at it. And if they love it, and they probably will because you take care of things, you could get all kinds of money on this, cash for your car. Used car values are higher than ever before. They'll take all makes and models. Doesn't need to be a Nissan or an Infiniti. They'll give you a super fast appraisal, and you say, shoot, sign the papers. Now, you can use that as down payment on a brand new Nissan if you like, or maybe you need a used car. Maybe you're sitting around going, well, I guess somebody's going to come in, they're moving to Guam and whatever, and they're going to need a ride. So let's go to Nissan Guam and check out the great sale they've got. The Nissan Ninja sale is going on. So all those used cars that people are taking in, well, they refurb them, change out the oil and the belts and all of the things that need to get taken care of, and turn them practically into brand new automobiles and give you some incredible savings, up to $14,000 on the used car inventory. Go and take a look at it. NissanGuam.com.
Now, more Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie. Spitting truth like watermelon seeds at a summer picnic. Call now, 888-TALK, 888-8255.
So, okay, here we are back after that short break, and we now divert our attention to someone who has been referred to as the most dangerous man in the room. Hello, our Carl. Lay it on for us.
Hey, good afternoon, Bob. Can you hear me?
No, I can't hear you, Carl. What did you say?
I didn't hear the sound where my call went through.
Well, your call
yeah,
call will always come to me, and you know, the kind of the custom here on Tall Tales is that we don't spend a lot of time with formalities like, hi, Bob, how are you? I'm fine, Carl. How are you? I'm doing pretty well. How's your lumbago? Well, it's been pretty good because I've been using salam pasta. We just kind of start right out in the middle of the game, right?
We cut to the chase.
Exactly.
Usually there's that little sound that tells me the call went through, and I somehow missed that sound.
All right.
Anyway, good afternoon, my bros, my two bros, and all my bros and sisters out there in Tall Tales international listening audience. Yeah, I just wanted to call in quickly on a couple of things. One of them was Troy's editorial. You know, Bob, if you're Guam's chief curmudgeon, Troy has got to be Guam's chief muckraker.
Absolutely.
He's earned the title, and he keeps earning it more and more. And one thing I appreciate about Troy, it kind of annoyed me for a while because he seemed to be going after Republicans largely, if not exclusively. And I was kind of thinking, you know, Republicans aren't the only ones with problems, you know, and issues. But I think he's demonstrating with time that he is pretty much an equal opportunity muckraker. So I really appreciate that. And as long as there are people like Troy here, you know, on Island, and you and the other Governor Leon Guerrero and other people like that.
Let's tip our hat to Helen Middlebrook, too, Carl.
Helen Middlebrook. Oh, yes, she has definitely earned a place in that esteemed list of muckrakers.
In the Tall Tales version of Mount Rushmore, she'll be there.
Absolutely. Thank you for calling that oversight to my attention. That is so true. She's a good writer, and she puts forth very important ideas in a very good way. But the main thing I wanted to call about was this: the recent, what should have been a nuclear bomb released on the in the news, and that was the release of, or partial release of, the Durham investigation, which has been going for, seems like, ever since, you know, a long time. And it should have been, you know, if it was a Republican, it would be like, you know, huge block letters on the front, you know, about how this evidence has now been come out that
sort of like when it's the other guy, 20-point or 30-point headlines, Trump caught double parking.
Exactly. Yeah, and it should be. To me, what the Durham report has released I think demonstrate, and the lack of reaction by the corporate, quote, news media just illustrates the power of the combined corporate, quote, news media and social media and these giant corporations like Google that influence how information flows and to which people. It just illustrates the power, and it demonstrates more even than any corruption that might have happened during the last election. It illustrates the incredible power that these billion-dollar corporations had in the last election, and how they siphoned information in directions that were helpful to the Biden administration and harmful to the Trump administration. And when Trump was running for office the first time, it was estimated that because of his unconventional style and his ability to grab headlines, that he probably got over $2 billion worth of earned media just for being outrageous on purpose. But I think what the corporate, quote, news media and social media and things like Google did was worth at least that, if not much, much more in I'm trying to think of the word, where someone donates to a campaign, but it's not actually money.
In kind.
Yeah, in-kind contributions, exactly. I mean, you're looking at easily, well over $2 billion of in-kind contributions by placing their super fat thumbs on the scale.
And then also, sometimes it's not what the media actually said, but
what they didn't say.
What they didn't say. Hunter who?
Yeah. The two biggest political crimes in American history, one of them was the Clinton campaign spying on the Trump campaign and the Trump administration when they were already in office, and the 3 Hunter Biden laptops with profuse evidence of influence peddling. I mean, if these were Republicans behind these things, it would have just been a nuclear blast in the news scene, and it was just crickets. I mean, total silence. So I've totally lost all trust for corporate, quote, news media and the rest, and social media and all that other stuff.
I got to interject something here, Carl. The left is very fond of calling Republicans fascists. And a lesson on fascism. Fascism is, in many respects, very similar to socialism. It requires great amounts of central planning, central control, and an authoritarian approach to government. In socialism, the government owns the means of distribution and production. In fascism, the government doesn't own them, it just co-opts them. So we see big media, big pharma, large industries becoming woke, going the same way as the Democrats. So the Democrats don't have to own them because they've co-opted them, especially the media. The media won't say anything bad about Biden, no matter what. So it's a classic example of how fascism really works.
Exactly. Mussolini was a socialist before he innovated with the idea of fascism. He understood that workers of the world in capitalist countries were not going to rise up in a bloody revolution, because under capitalism, despite its flaws, their lives were incrementally improving. They were getting a small home, and their lives were improving. But they would die for country. And one thing that he I think, kind of in an ingenious way, Mussolini was a pretty clever guy. He understood that as opposed to communism, which actually nationalized and took over property, he allowed people to maintain private ownership, but the state basically controlled what was produced. They could come in at any time and tell a factory, you're going to produce, 10 million widgets because we need this for the war effort, or whatever. And so
you're going to forget about spaghetti. You got to manufacture C rations for the war effort. Hey, Carl, I got to take a short break, but I appreciate your insights here. Did you finish? Tell me whatever you wanted to say.
Pretty much, I did. And thank you for allowing me to chime in. I always appreciate it.
Talking to you, Carl. So long.
Great show as usual.
What's a better way to celebrate Valentine's Day than celebrating it at Mescla with their 3-course meal? Starting off your meal with a salad appetizer, followed by a main entree of your choice, and of course, to top it all off, to make Valentine's as sweet as the day itself, a melting lava cake with vanilla ice cream and caramel sauce. So what are you waiting for? Call them at 671-649-2652 or visit mesclaguam.com for reservations. See you there.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
We buy a homeowner's policy and never give it another thought until something happens. Life brings changes, and our coverage needs can change. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Okay, here we are. We got about 9 more minutes to the big halftime show, and today is Monday, so at the conclusion of the halftime show, we'll have more entertainment. We're going to watch Hope Cristobal's screen test. We're ready to go with that, right, Jose? Absolutely. So if you haven't seen it before, you're going to, I can't use the word enjoy. You're going to find it quite interesting. And if you have friends in the neighborhood that haven't seen them, give them a call and tell them to come out over and pop some corn, watch Hope's screen test. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to go check out the card here today. And today is, of course, Red Shirt Monday. So I want you to notice that I am wearing my red I can't maneuver this thing downward here. Stand a little bit. As you can see, I'm wearing my red shirt, and you can also see I've got my red lanya on today. They're both the same color, so it's Red Shirt Monday. And so, needless to say, I'm going to start out with Paul Zerzan and systemic racism. We've got more GWA versus Cortec. The Attorney General versus double pay, then Robert Underwood versus oppressors, and that ties in nicely with the Hope Cristobal show. And then if we get to it, I've got BLM versus society, woke colleges versus us, racism versus Harvard, and so on. So let me start out with systemic racism. Just as my shirt, you would never dare say that the shirt I'm wearing is anything but red. It is not orange any more than the rice in this particular picture here is anything but red.
And we all know you would never, ever wear an orange shirt.
Absolutely. It's just so contrary to the narrative that no responsible person would ever think of such a thing.
Absolutely not.
In fact, Pam Duval on Facebook wishes me a happy birthday and tells me she likes my red shirt. So there you go.
Very appropriate for Valentine's Day.
Absolutely. Red shirt on Valentine's Day.
It's your birthday today?
No.
Okay.
No, I only have one a year, and we haven't gotten there yet.
I thought you were cashing in, kind of like early retirement.
An early birthday?
Cashing in your birthdays.
Yeah, well, they come fast. You'll find this out as you get older. The older you get, the faster the birthdays come.
Oh, boy.
You just finished throwing out the wrapping paper for this year's present, and you look at the count. Oh, here we are again. Okay, so starting out with systemic racism, I think everybody is familiar with the idea that I use the red rice flap as a good analog to what we've just been talking about, the narrative versus the truth. Ellen Middlebrook really laid it on. There's actual truth, and then what you can read in the newspapers, because what you see in the newspapers fits the narrative.
You know how she knows she spoke the truth? She got the Facebook treatment from the Post.
Yeah, she got canceled by the Post. Yeah, very good. Her editorials don't meet community standards. Okay, so Zerzan is a notable character. You know, he is the guy who's at the center of a battle over systemic racism. He went head-to-head, or eyeball to eyeball, with Hope Cristobal, however you wanted to say it. And he is one of the few people that comes forward here in this format as a critical thinker. You know, I don't think you'll ever catch him saying, everybody knows that. Yeah, and today he has a letter to the editor that I think is classic Zerzan. In 2 years, half the population of Japan will be over the age of 50, and there will be 2 million fewer Japanese than today. Fewer Japanese will mean fewer Japanese tourists to Guam, and those that do come will spend less than before because they're older. Old people tend to save, not spend. Since this situation applies to all the nations of East Asia, smart money will not invest in Guam tourism. To save our economy, we need to redirect to the aging baby boomers on the mainland and convince them to retire on Guam. Many people in the U.S. would love to retire in Hawaii, but Hawaii is too expensive. However, Guam is not. Just a little effort at publicity could replace our dying tourism with a robust economy based on financially comfortable retirees. The sooner we get started on this, the better. I think he's got a really good point here.
Guam, the new Florida.
The new St. Petersburg.
New St. Petersburg.
Yeah.
He's onto something. We might not have to go to court or for this whole, the SSNI thing.
Yeah.
Or they'll say, oh, look, they're all coming here to Guam.
That's
we
right.
might as well open it up there,
Yeah,
too.
might as well open it up for these folks from the mainland. But what he says makes a whole lot of sense. And, of course, my prediction was that we'll never get back to 2019. That we'll see hotels boarded up, raised. We've seen one sold in a bankruptcy auction already. Yeah, and you know, the planning right now sounds like this. Well, you know, when we get back to normal, well, we're not going to get back to normal. I don't think we'll ever get back to the way it was in 2019. So if the government's going to do anything, it's got to be a little bit more nimble, engage in critical thinking, and at least entertain ideas like Zerzan's. Okay, let's break for the big halftime show, and we'll come back to the Hope Cristobal show.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
A party in Tinseltown. I'm Chris DeMeo, Fox News. The Los Angeles Rams have won Super Bowl 56.
The Rams were built to win the Super Bowl, and they have sealed the deal.
The call on NBC, the Rams topped the Bengals 23-20. The White House continues to urge all Americans in Ukraine to leave immediately, warning that a Russian invasion could happen at any time.
Weapon shipments continue to arrive in Ukraine as the country braces for the possibility of a Russian invasion. U.S. intelligence assessments do indicate this could take place in the coming days, even hours. Both the Russians and Ukrainians continue military exercises. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky watched as the Ukrainian National Guard conducted drills. Now, the Ukrainians do seem to have a different view on the situation. We did ask Zelensky about the assessment and basically what's happening on the ground from his perspective. On Saturday, several thousand people marched through the streets of Kiev singing the Ukrainian national anthem and shouting. They held signs that say Russian President Putin is a war criminal.
Fox's Trey Yingst. An influx of migrants continuing to come to the U.S. southern border.
Border agents have been routinely having to go after runners in the brush. These are not the family units giving themselves up. These are the guys, typically single adults, who come across illegally and are typically wearing dark clothing or camouflage, do not want to be caught trying to get deeper into the United States, and Border Patrol will use their helicopters and their agents. They'll fan out into that deep brush and pull them out. Then there's the other side of the coin, the family units. Sunset and sunrise, these family units will show up. We saw about 50 people last night giving themselves up, a lot of pregnant women. They often bring their young children with them. They are looking for Border Patrol to give themselves up because they believe they will be released into the interior of the country.
Fox's Bill Malugin. Prosecutors likely to rest their case Monday against 3 former Minneapolis cops charged with violating George Floyd's civil rights. America's listening to Fox News.
Hafaday, this is Congressman Nicholas. While local COVID-19 testing has unfortunately become less available lately, there are 4 free at-home federally available COVID tests that you can have to test yourselves and your families as needed. Please contact your congressional office at 671-475-6453 or at michael.snicholas@mail.house.gov to find out how we can help you access those tests.
This ad was paid for with official funds from the Office of Congressman Michael F.Q. San Nicolas.
Kami ang inyong bangko na tapat sa serbisyo. Tunay na kaibigan na handa para sa inyo. Ang bangko ng kinabukasan, laging maaasahan. Pan Pacific, where others plug branches, we place through.
President Biden's search for a Supreme Court nominee is expected to get rolling this week.
President Biden could begin interviewing a short list of Supreme Court contenders this week, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki says.
The interview process for any president typically happens very late in the process. In terms of the specific number, I'm just not going to get into that level of detail from here.
President told NBC News last week he had done a deep dive on about 4 potential nominees. He has promised to nominate the first black woman to the Supreme Court and intends to name his pick by the end of the month. Jared Halpern, Fox News.
More states are taking the step of lifting statewide mask mandates, but say they understand that the pandemic is still not over.
A number of governors are now saying the decisions on masks should be an individual choice or governed on a local level. One of those leaders, New Jersey Democrat Phil Murphy on CBS Face the Nation, said he feels with warmer weather coming,
and assuming the virus continues to go in the right direction, you'll have the overwhelming amount of districts following suit and lifting the mandate.
For now, the CDC still recommends the unvaccinated and those who aren't fully vaccinated wear masks in public while indoors. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
Gas prices once again up significantly over the last few weeks.
There's been a big oil price spike in the past 3 weeks, and we can already see it on the street. In the past 3 weeks, the average gasoline price is up 15 cents a gallon to $3.55, and diesel fuel even more so, up 21 cents to $3.91.
Trilby Lundberg, the publisher of the Lundberg Survey, the national average price is up $1.04 from a year ago this time. Police have moved in to clear and arrest the remaining protesters near the busiest U.S.-Canadian border crossing. I'm Chris DeMeo. This is Fox News.
$15 might not get you that far, but Chili's is bucking the trend with $15 meal deals. At Chili's, $15 gives you not 1, not 2, but 3-course meal deals complete with a drink, a starter, and an entree. Mix and match 3-course meals 15 ways to Sunday with soup, salad, or chips and salsa to start, and ranchero chicken tacos, honey chipotle crispers with rice, bacon ranch quesadillas, or personal fajitas for the main course. Build your own $15 meal deal at Chili's. More life and great value happen here.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
Half a day. This is Clara Manglonia from Security Title with an important warning. Buyer fraud is real, and home buyers and sellers are one of the biggest targets, even on Guam. When sending money by wire transfer, be sure to confirm the wire instructions by phone, not email. In this case, it's good to be suspicious and know who you're dealing with. Let the professionals at Security Title work with you to minimize loss due to wire fraud. We are here to help.
Guam Auto Spot has the best selection in Buick, GMC, Mitsubishi, and used cars like the 2021 Mitsubishi Mirage starting at $127 per paycheck, 0 down. Call 671-478-AUTO to take a test drive or get pre-approved online at guamautospot.com.
Okay, so here we are, back from the big halftime show. I had to make a head call there during the show. I'm a little bit tardy, so my bad. So I think we're going to go straight from here to the Hope Cristobal show. Unfortunately, we have a technical glitch today due to some unplanned updating by one of our cybernetic vendors. We are unable to show the video, but we do have the audio. So we'll have the video next week, but we'll run the audio now just as to set the tone. Go ahead, Jose.
Colonizer. You're nothing but a white colonizer. That's who you are. Colonization. It's the same thing as slow murder. You're a murderer. That's who you are. We need to just do different. We need to do better. Get off my island.
Sir, you need to go. You can't be policing people here and telling people how to protest or what to protest for. You need to go. You need to go. I'm against this. That's cool, but you cannot be policing people and telling them how to protest and what to advocate for. She has a right to yell.
I'm an indigenous Chamorro. I have more rights here than you are. You came here because of the structures of colonialism, asshole.
Please. You need to get out of here. Please pause this. Get out of here. Please, this is not too late. When I get a chance, go. Please, please. Please, please. Thank you. Thank you, pause this. Please, please. No, you did not know. What happened, ma'am?
Well, he confronted me.
What did he
He's
say?
telling me I shouldn't be here. I support Black Lives Matter. It's part of the colonialistic systemic racism. And I came here to support these people. He's a white man that has come here. And he continues the legacy of colonialism. He continues to fight people, individuals, my goodness. I'm a former senator. I authored the Commission on Decolonization. Karoho. Ay, mamalo.
We are proud of you, Auntie.
Si Diyos mangasi.
He said.
So, yeah, we're proud of you, Auntie. You really put that white man in his place, told him to get off the island, told him the only reason he came here is because of systemic colonialism and that he's a murderer.
And that she authored the Decolonization Commission.
And she is the person who proudly told us that she authored the bill that created the, it's not really the Decolonization Commission. It has a much more complicated and also telling name. The true name, or the full name is the Commission on Decolonization for the Implementation and Exercise of Chamorro Self-Determination. I call it the Chamorro Independence Commission.
You know what's interesting for Chamorros, or people who identify as Chamorros, as myself, because that's my lineage as well, we ought to have more than just one choice here of who's representing a group of people who are as diverse as any other group in the world is.
That's right.
We're not singularity. We're not just one thought, one voice.
Yeah.
And we all have different viewpoints that if you're going to claim to yourself to be Chamorro, represent everybody else or just say, I represent this fringe group or this niche group.
And of course, that's all they do. And I've explained before that when they're talking Chamorro self-determination, they're only talking independence. And I've made the point over and over again that they use critical race theory tactics in order to advance that cause. Start out with historical grievances, quote unquote, paint them in a light most unfavorable to the oppressor and most favorable to the oppressed. The oppressor, of course, being white male Christians, or maybe Jews, America, the United States in this particular case, and then say this wasn't a one-off. This is an example of systemic racism that goes on, and it goes on right on up until today, and that race is everything. Everything is based on race, and the only way to make it better, you can't fix it. It's not, you can't repair it. You got to junk it and do something else. And that something else in the mainland is Marxism. Here it's independence, and I'm not so sure there's a big difference between the two. You know, we've had some coming out here just in the last few days. We've had Neil Weir and Robert come out and embrace the famous term of systemic racism in the Chautauqua that they did with Representative Christensen from the Virgin Islands. Panel discusses territorial rights and racism. And this ran in the Daily News. I've talked about this before. The United States has a colonies problem by, first of all, denying that they have colonies. It denies these areas the core American creed, which is the only legitimate right to govern, comes from the consent of the government. That is clearly absent in all of the territories. That's what Robert said. And then it's undeniable that racism continues to impact federal policy toward the people in the territory, said former Governor Guam resident Neil Weir. It's important that conversations about race in America's colonies problem are included as part of the nation's broader conversations about race, equity, and justice. And he says that, you know, it's systemic racism. So That's a first. The first time we've heard systemic racism trotted out. And I've been making the parallel between critical race theory and the tactics of the separatists here on the island. And I think I was affirmed on the 10th of September in Robert Underwood's column when he started the column with this sentence: I've been teaching critical race theory since 1972. No! Every course I've ever taught and nearly every public policy speech I've given in D.C. or Guahan involved critical race theory. So there you go. Critical race theory, systemic racism, historic grievances, etc. And the euphemism for independence, tomorrow self-determination. So we have a word here. The word of the day is praxis. It's a word that has not been a part of my vocabulary up until now, and I regret it because it is exactly what's going on here. And here's a definition of praxis. Praxis is the process by which a theory, lesson, or skill is enacted, embodied, or realized. Praxis may also refer to the act of engaging, applying, exercising, realizing, or practicing ideas. This has been recurrent in the topic in the field of philosophy, discussed in the writings of guys like Plato and Aristotle, but also Karl Marx and Antonio Gramsci, Gramsci has as much responsibility for critical race theory as Kimberly Crenshaw. And this paragraph winds up, it is meaning in the political, educational, spiritual, and medical realms. So praxis. So this is what I've been saying. It's one thing to study critical race theory. It's something else to practice it. And people who embrace it are not talking about studying it as though it's an academic discipline. They're talking about practicing it. They're talking about the praxis. And if Robert is confessing to that, it really ties in exactly with what I've been saying about the separatists, their embrace of critical race theory tactics. One more explanation here about the difference between studying something and praxis. Let's talk about Mein Kampf. It's a Hitler sort of autobiographical tome where he told about himself and what he wanted to do. Probably 25 years ago, for some reason, I got curious and I read Mein Kampf. Pretty easy to read almost anything nowadays with the internet, etc. But this was even before the internet. So I read it and I understood what he was saying, and it really lends to your understanding of politics in European and national politics in the 1930s and World War II. I never practiced anything that I've found in Mein Kampf. The trip that I took to the Soviet Union in hotels frequented by foreigners, you'd find a lot of free books, things like Lenin's What Is to Be Done and Iskra, famous communist texts. And I picked them up. They were free. What the hell? And I read them. And I've read a lot of Karl Marx's writings because I'm a curious kind of guy and I like to know what the other side is doing. Praxis? No, I've never practiced any of those things. So critical race theory, yeah, I've studied it. I know what it's about, but I'm not going to practice it. And that's where the rub comes in. You know, the great freedom of speech folks were saying, well, you know, what's wrong with critical? We're going to be burning books again and telling people they can't learn about race and critical race theory is going to be. No, that's not it at all. It's just that we're not going to engage in the practice. We're not going to allow it to happen. We're not going to subject kids in grade school to the practice of critical race theory. Now, I've got more on this, but I have a different rule for this this part of the agenda where I don't finish before I take calls. I notice I've got another Joe on the line, so I'm going to take a break here and talk to another Joe. Go for it, another Joe.
Thank you, Bob. So the reason is, would you say that the reason that you would say that the local interest in independence is more similar to stateside Marxist movement? It would be because the local independent movement is voicing support. They're definitely not voicing opposition to Black Lives Matter affiliation with Marxist interests.
Well, I could reach that conclusion without even talking about Black Lives Matter. I'm saying tactically, they're mirroring the tactics of critical race theory. Just like Black Lives Matter, of course, does the same thing. And then, of course, we had Hope Cristobal here, the face and voice of the separatist movement, telling us on camera, I support Black Lives. Well, of course you support Black Lives Matter. Yeah. It's just like I support the Green Bay Packers. What else am I going to do?
Well, okay, Bob, you won't mind me asking then, would it be way out in left field to suggest that Native Americans under the Bureau of Indian Affairs are kind of put in a predicament where they have no choice but to put things in perspective of being what percentage Native American they are, so that they would qualify to stay on their reservation? Would it be fair to say that they have no choice but to frame it in a similar context?
Yeah, they have a choice. They don't have to do the praxis. They don't have to take critical race theory and practice it. That's not a choice for them. And of course, the reason that Native Americans have the reservations, et cetera, is because they have a separate sovereignty, which is something that I suspect Robert and the separatists are talking about also.
As long as they're upfront about it, right, and not being sneaky.
Say again?
Would you say it's comparable? As long as they're not being sneaky about it and they're upfront about it, then we wouldn't have to call them out and say, "Hey, what are you really trying to do?" But would you say it's comparable to Canton or not? Not really. The Native American reservations. Comparable
to what?
Canton, like in what we think of as cantons, whether it be in Europe or in North America, cantons, C-A-N-T-O-N.
I think you need to work a little bit on the definition of canton.
We identified as a what is it? A administrative division terminology. Division in some countries, notably Switzerland. That's pretty much.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Switzerland has 22 cantons, and it's a federal system, but the cantons have a little bit more sovereignty and independence than the 50 states of the United States. Is that what you're saying?
Next time, well, the reservations, they have a little bit more sovereignty, wouldn't they?
But they're not part of a federal system, so that's something of a difference.
Okay, thanks for your time. I'll come out with you listening.
All right, another go. Okay, getting back on track here. Yeah, my thesis is this, that there is this critical race theory. And critical race theory it's kind of like something that Saul Alinsky would write about. It's not a what to do, but a how to go about doing it. And it starts out with, with the historical grievance, the systemic, all the things that I've talked about so many times. And it's a means directed toward an end. And the end for the critical race theorist folks in the mainland is a Marxist state. And here it's a state independent from the United States. And Robert has come out and basically confessed he knew about critical race theory even before Kimberly Crenshaw, and that he's been doing it ever since. I really wished I'd have known that when he was running for Washington, but that's another story. And he and Neil Weir have picked up one of the key terms here, systemic racism. So there is an academic theory. It goes all the way back to Marx, critical theory, and then critical legal theory, and then critical race theory. And it all has the same basis. Marx's critical theory, however, was that there was the division was between workers and the bourgeoisie. The bourgeoisie were the oppressors then. But of course, I've explained more than once how the Frankfurt School figured out this ain't going to work, that the workers of the world are not going to arise. We've got to try a different tactic, and that's where they came up with the critical race intersectionality thing with a lot of help from Antonio Gramsci. So there is this theoretical part of it that you could read about. I don't think it'll hurt you at all. In fact, I would encourage you to do as much research on it as you can. But let's talk about the praxis. And I have an article here from Breitbart, one of my favorite websites, and it's by a guy named Brecken Thies. It ran on February the 8th, and it's titled, "Attacking Whiteness is Not Enough. California's School District Encourages Racial Divide." California Riverside School District, or did I already go through this one once before? Yeah, I've already been through this one once before. Excuse me, I got my papers mixed up a little bit here. I have another one somewhere, but I'll save that until tomorrow. Let's just close off this part of the discussion with the understanding that Robert and Neil have embraced critical race theory, have accused the United States of systemic racism. And of course, the antidote to systemic racism, if you really understand it, is anti-racism. And anti-racism means that the oppressed have to be given all kinds of special privileges. Repeat told us the other day, maybe fishing rights for chamorros, but the oppressed have to have special privileges, etc. And then the oppressors. Now, the fact that you haven't oppressed anybody personally doesn't mean anything, because it's all about race. So if you're not a person of color, you are identified as an oppressor. And you must be re-educated, retrained, whatever, so that you properly fit in to a correct society, an anti-racist society. So that's Robert Underwood, critical race theory. Okay, I'm going to come back to this tomorrow, but I'm going to go on with the card for now. Next item on the card is Cortec versus the Waterworks. And let's go to Chicago and see if there's any running water in Chicago.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Hafaday, this is Congressman Nicholas. While local COVID-19 testing has unfortunately become less available lately, there are 4 free at-home federally available COVID tests that you can have to test yourselves and your families as needed. Please contact your congressional office at 671-475-6453 or at michael.snicholas@mail.house.gov to find out how we can help you access those tests.
This ad was paid for with official funds from the office of Congressman Michael F.Q. San Nicolas.
Do you have a car? Do you want to get rid of it? Yeah, yes, there are people. How did you know? Here's the deal. Take your used car to the guys over at Nissan Guam, and they're going to take a look at it. And if they love it, and they probably will because you take care of things. You could get all kinds of money on this, cash for your car. Used car values are higher than ever before. They'll take all makes and models. Doesn't need to be a Nissan or an Infiniti. They'll give you a super fast appraisal, and you say, shoot, sign the papers. Now, you can use that as down payment on a brand new Nissan if you like, or maybe you need a used car. Maybe you're sitting around going, well, I got somebody's going to come in, they're moving to Guam and whatever, and they're going to need a ride. So let's go to Nissan Guam and check out the great sale they've got. The Nissan Ninja sale is going on. So all those used cars that people are taking in, well, they refurb them, change out the oil and the belts and all of the things that need to get taken care of, and turn them practically into brand new automobiles and give you some incredible savings, up to $14,000 on the used car inventory. Go and take a look at it. NissanGuam.com.
Seventh inning stretch, Wrigley Field. It's good to get up and stretch and move around a little bit. And Wrigley Field out there in the center field bleachers means I got 2 more innings to go before this game is over. And I'm going to pick up with a story that ran in the Daily News. GWA paying Cortec $220 million could triple water rates. Congratulations, Daily News. You finally figured out that this is an important story. After Troy has been mining it for what, about a month now, I think? Yeah. I think maybe what we ought to do is buy a paid subscription to Candid News and send it down to the Daily News. It'd help them stay a whole lot more current and more relevant with what's going on.
That's true.
And they wouldn't have to engage in systemic racism instead of screwing around with the news. The Guam Water Works, which collects about $110 million from its customers each year, can't afford to pay Cortec $220 million over a land dispute, according to Water Agency General Manager Maget Berdadzu. Berdadzu said also that GWA would be unable to borrow enough money to pay Cortec. One option would be to triple Guam's water rates to pay Cortec. And then we'll all know how the lady with a $36,000 water bill felt, right? But it's unclear that the Public Utilities Commission would allow that to happen. Berdadzu told the Superior Court of Guam in a February 4 declaration. Household that uses 5,000 gallons of water per month currently pays $62.77. Tripling that cost would cost $188.31 a month, with $125.54 to pay Cortec. Cortec, which in 2015 acquired ancestral land in Dededo, claims it now owns the land that has been used since 1980 to operate GWA's Northern District wastewater treatment plant. Cortec wants $130 million in damages, monthly rent and interest, retroactive to 1980, and monthly rent payments until the government of Guam vacates the premises. According to GWA, that would cost a total of $220 million if Cortec wins its court case. Superior Court Judge Elise Iriarte last November ruled Cortec has an ownership interest in the property and can continue to pursue its claim in Superior Court. The Department of Land Management and GWA have argued that Cortec's ownership interest is based on flawed certificates of title issued by Land Management in 2010, and that Guam law prohibits the wastewater plant site from ever being transferred to private ownership. Guam law prohibits it? No. National law. The federal government in 1980 gave Guam a lease to maintain and operate the wastewater plant, which was built on 13 acres of military land within the 862-acre Air Force Communications Annex. The federal government later returned 3,213 acres of excess federal land to the government of Guam, including the Communications Annex. The Ancestral Lands Commission deeded 257 acres of excess federal land to the estate of Jose Martinez Torres, Jose.
Not I.
Including part of the Communications Annex. The Torres estate in September 2007 sold 252 acres of its ancestral land to Kil Yu Yoon for $21.4 million. Yoon in 2008 subdivided the property into 8 smaller lots, and in January 2010 deeded land to his company Yonex Enterprises Corporation. Cortec acquired the property in May of 2015 for $178.1 million after Unix defaulted on its mortgage with Cortec. Cortec attorney Vanessa Williams, I'll bet you she's really tough in oral argument. Vanessa Williams in January told the court GWA failed to reserve an interest in the returned excess land before ownership reverted to GovGuam for eventual return to its original owners. GWA failed at every turn. GWA is now trying to correct decades of mistakes at the enormous expense of Cortec, namely the $178 million Cortec paid for this property, Williams stated. GWA wants to appeal Iriarte's decision to the Supreme Court, but Iriarte has not agreed to pause the Superior Court case to allow for an appeal. Ordinarily, you don't appeal until there's a final judgment. Interlocutory appeals are possible. This doesn't look like a case for one, but we'll see. To support its request for a pause in the case, GWA recently filed additional briefs with Iriarte, arguing that her November ruling that Cortec has an ownership interest will cause irreparable harm and therefore must be addressed by justices. The November 3 order appears to recognize some sort of private interest in this public facility and has raised a number of issues that I am reviewing that could harm GWA and the public interest beyond the immediate and obvious financial burden that will have to be borne by current and future ratepayers to satisfy a judgment against GWA, Bordazzo stated. It could set back GWA's efforts to comply with Federal Clean Water Act requirements, resulting in millions of dollars in fines, Bordazzo said. Iriarte set a March 4 deadline for Cortec to respond to GWA's latest filing and a March 18 deadline for GWA to reply to Cortec's response. If the Supreme Court of Guam hears GWA's appeal, it will have to decide whether Associate Justice Robert Torres would be allowed to participate. Torres in January filed a notice of potentially disqualifying facts, stating that the disputed property was owned by his great-grandfather, Jose Martinez Torres.
Again, not me.
I do not believe the past ownership of the property by my late great-grandfather disqualifies me from sitting or acting as a justice. I have no personal bias or prejudice about any parties, and I do not believe my impartiality would reasonably be questioned under these circumstances. However, I provide notice of the facts in the interest of transparency and the best interest of justice, Torres said. On that particular point, the fact that his grandfather owned the land before condemnation, I think is just a little bit too remote to cause Justice Torres to be disqualified. That would be my holding on it if I were to rule.
Something's nagging me here, just for clarification, Bob. Cortec acquired this land in 2015. Mm-hmm. But they are looking to retroactivate monthly rent to 1980. How is that possible?
Well, they're claiming inverse condemnation. They're saying that that the waterworks used that land when it was really Cortec's predecessor in interest. So I think their theory must be that when they took the land, the claim came with it.
Was there a claim before, or is it an automatic claim?
No, it's maybe I should say, to make it easier for you, a potential claim.
Oh. If
you have a claim, a claim is kind of like mathematics. It's just there. You may not discover it, but it's there. And it may not be recognized until someone asserts the claim. But I think that must be Cortex's approach to it.
Okay, that they are author, or what's the word called? They are a party to this claim because they are now the new owners.
Successor.
Yeah. Interesting.
And then on Ratio this morning, Troy brought up the point that there was nothing going on in this case until Michael Bora brought the matter to court to correct the certificate of title it issued in 2010. And I've explained certificates of title before. Unless you're Judge Barrett Anderson dealing with Jackie Terlahi, the only way an error in a certificate of title can be corrected is judicially. Yeah. So Bora brought suit to correct the certificate of title, which showed that Cortex was the fee simple owner. And of course, Cortex is not going to sit still for that. Then there's a counterclaim to quiet title, and then another counterclaim for adverse possession, et cetera. And the thing has really gotten out of control. So Troy poses a really important question. What prompted Michael Bora to do that? Who whispered in his ear? What happened? And I've mentioned before that this is not the first time Michael Bora has had his name in the paper dealing with certificates of title, and his deputy registrar, Andrew Santos. And I've also opined that one of the things we ought to do, and once we get past this, is to abolish the whole certificates of title system. It's not a good system, and this is probably a really good example. I want to go back and analyze something that happened in this article here. And that is that Michael Berdaju, Maget Berdaju, apparently filed an affidavit with the court showing the court how much it would cost if she rules in favor of Cortex. Now, I suppose that's legitimate, but ask yourself, is that the way courts should rule on cases? And I've got a Latin maxim here that I always print on the bottom of the calendar so I don't forget it. And here it is. Fiat justitia ruat caelum. And what that means is, let justice be done if the heavens fall. In other words, let justice be done regardless of the consequences. So if Cortex is right, and it's really their land, and it's not GWA's land, then the fact that it's going to cost the people a lot of money, if you subscribe to that theory, should not cause Judge Iriarte to rule that way. That is what we talk of in terms of justice. That you don't have to worry, if you go to court, you don't have to worry about getting hometowned. That the judge is going to think, oh boy, if I rule for this guy, it's going to be unpopular with the taxpayers. It's not the way it's supposed to work. This is going to be an extremely interesting story as it plays out. Be thankful that I will be here trying to alert you to every nuance as it arises. Okay, let's head for Churchill Downs, and we'll come back to the AG versus double pay then.
Always here to help you. This island is our home. Through the years, we've been a friend to the neighbors we have known. Now we're banking on the future. More services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
What's a better way to celebrate Valentine's Day than celebrating it at Mescla with their 3-course meal? Starting off your meal with a salad appetizer, followed by a main entree of your choice, and of course, to top it all off, to make Valentine's as sweet as the day itself, a melting lava cake with vanilla ice cream and caramel sauce. So what are you waiting for? Call them at 671-649-2652 or visit mesclaguam.com for reservations. See you there.
So here we are, Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky. A couple more furlongs, and I will be at the finish line, finishing up the first day of the week of Tall Tales. Man, there's nothing like Monday, the best day of the week. We got a whole week ahead of us. It's a day that I wear my red shirt. It's the day that we do the Hope Cristobal screen test. You know, when Friday comes, there's just a whole lot to look forward to on Monday. Okay, this is AG versus double pay, and this is a story that ran in the Post. No law applies double pay to the pandemic. That's the AG's position in a court case that's ongoing. The personnel rule that guides double pay compensation for government of Guam employees applies to typhoons, and there is no basis in law that could apply it to the pandemic. That is according to the government of Guam as part of its counter-arguments in a class action lawsuit filed by government employees seeking double pay. The complaint was first filed in October 2020. An amended version was filed in September 2021, listing the government of Guam and the governor as defendants. The suit is represented by 10 plaintiffs. I don't think it's represented by 10. I think the suit is brought by 10 plaintiffs, members of the Guam Federation of Teachers, but it involves more than 500 employees allegedly denied double pay during the public health emergency. Now, when it comes to double pay, GFT is right up there at the window filing suit. If it came to the Every Child Act and an adequate public education, no, nothing to see here. We don't need that. Double pay for essential government workers is an issue that arose during the early months of the pandemic when the government was operating at a limited capacity and some agencies were closed. The government moved to dismiss the amended complaint in November 2021. Assistant Attorney General Jordan Lawrence Paulun submitted the motion. Among the arguments, Paulun stated the Department of Administration Rule 8.406, the rule that guides compensation and leaves matters during natural disasters and emergency conditions, is not legislatively authorized. Oh. But it's a rule. The DOA rule sets a rate of pay via executive order when the power to set compensation lies with the legislature. Paulin wrote, adding that the personnel rules were never adopted into law by the legislature, nor does Rule 8.406 have a counterpart in statute. In contrast to Rule 8.406 and its double pay provision, there are a number of laws that set premium rates under certain conditions. Quote, there is no statutory authorization or counterpart for double pay during a public health emergency. Without legislative authorization through law, DOA Rule 8.406 does not create any right or entitlement to compensation, Paulun said. Plaintiffs in this class action suit are represented by Rosano, Walsh, and Torres. In addressing the argument about DOA rules, the plaintiffs' lawyers noted that OAG had applied those rules to support other pay calculations or justify adverse actions against employees. The argument that the personnel rules were ineffective would contradict decades of legal action taken by the government. Well, another issue with the OAG's position is that the courts have time and again confronted the personnel rules, including Rule 8.406, and found no error in applying them to live cases, according to plaintiffs' response. I think there's a saying that you used the other day, but I'm going to modify it a little bit. 472 wrongs don't make a right. Didn't you say something like that, Jose?
Very close.
Yeah.
Give or take a number.
Yeah. Even if the rules were somehow not to exist because of a promulgation failing, the Supreme Court has made clear that the existence or non-existence of personnel rules does not define the rights of a classified employee. Rights emanate not only from whatever statutory or regulatory provisions are in place, but also from the United States Constitution and the law interpreting it. You know, I probably think that's a pretty good. I don't think there's. I have the Constitution here. I spent a lot of time with it. I haven't found the section in there in the Bill of Rights that said employees who work when everybody else has a day off shall not be deprived of double pay without due process. I haven't found that in the Bill of Rights yet. However, Paul Loon replied that the government is challenging the plaintiff's open-ended application of Rule 8.406 and not the entire set of DOA rules. The rules form an important part of the merit system, and the dispute in this case centers around the application of Rule 8.406 to a public health emergency created by, as were caused by Wuhan virus, Paul Loon stated. DOA Rule 8.406 appears to be derived from certain subsections of 4 GCA Section 6226 governing compensation during typhoons. Various levels of premium pay for emergency periods are only authorized during typhoons. Statutes, not regulations, create enforceable rights or entitlements, Balloon said, because the current pandemic is not a typhoon and the legislature has not authorized the exceptional compensation plaintiffs seek, the complaint must be dismissed. The class action suit is not the only case to go through the courts. The Supreme Court recently affirmed an earlier decision from the lower court denying the double pay lawsuit filed by police officer Steve Topaznia. In that case, the Superior Court had earlier determined that Topaznia failed to demonstrate that the double pay rule applied to him by failing to show that the police department was closed and by failing to allege that other GPDs were on excused leave, predicates for double pay. The Supreme Court concluded that the lower court's reliance on facility closure was not an error of law and not an abuse of discretion. So there we are. Now, I suspect that a lot of folks had that money already spent the first day. Conventional wisdom holds that, you know, when there's a typhoon, you have to stay home. But if you got to work, then you get paid. You're paid your stay-home pay, and you get paid for working. And I've characterized this as a misguided sense of barnyard equity that starts out with the idea, well, some people drew their full pay and they didn't have to work at all. So if I have to work, I got to get paid the same amount as I would get paid if I stayed home, plus I got to get paid my regular salary for working. And you know the reason for that, Jose? 2 reasons.
Critical wage theory.
Well, that's the third reason. First reason, it's only fair. Second reason, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Yeah. So that whole system, that whole idea doesn't make sense. The reason that the government has employees is for them to work, not for them to draw checks. And the beginning point has to be that if you don't work, you don't get paid. You start out with that proposition, and then from there out, you work on ways for people to get paid when they don't work. Annual leave, sick leave, and things like that. But paying somebody double because he actually had to do his job flies in the face of common sense. So we'll see how this plays out. Something else that was really interesting when this happened, I tipped everybody off to it. I was kind of a Troy Torres there, and I brought up Rule 8.406 from the get-go, and I said, you know, this is what's going to happen. This is what's going to, and the governor didn't do it. And she played hide the ball for a long time. She didn't talk about it until finally people got burned. When the director of administration, Byrne, came out and said, no, we aren't going to do that because the agencies weren't closed, and laid out the administration's strategy. We aren't going to do that. And then you remember senators were tripping over themselves to enact legislation to do the right thing, to make sure that people got double pay. Tina Rose Munya Barnes, the speaker at that time, had a bill, and a couple of other senators, including Joe Taitano, Joe St. Augustine, had bills The three were introduced, and Tina Rose Mooney Barnes, the speaker at that time, certified that those bills constituted a public emergency and had to be heard without the benefit of a public hearing. It just so happened that one of them was hers. So that was her ruling. But Joe St. Augustine made a motion that the session be continued for a week so that he could have a public hearing. And, you know, although they all got a lot of really good earned media, too long ago probably to count, unless they go about reminding everybody of it. But, you know, classic, I think the government employees will vote for me because I'm for double pay. But after the initial rounds of earned media, the whole thing kind of evaporated, and that was pretty much the end of it. And the courts may finally drive a wooden stake through the heart of the whole double pay initiative. I hope so, because it's not a sound policy. There ought to be some way that when people can't report to the work site, they're still able to do productive work and get paid for it. Otherwise, if they can't, then they shouldn't get paid. It's just that simple. Yeah, I know over here, well, it's not their fault that they don't come to work. Well, if I don't come to work, it doesn't matter whose fault it is, I don't get paid. And I've had enough jobs in private industry. I worked as a roofer one summer during my Christmas vacation. When it's raining hard, you don't roof. So, of course, I got paid my full 10 hours, right?
You prayed for rain.
Well, no, I got paid for my full 10 hours because it wasn't my fault I couldn't roof. No, I didn't get paid. Sorry about that. If you don't roof, you don't get paid. That's the real world. And the government has gone off in this other direction. Okay, how much time have I got left here, Jose?
About 2.5 minutes.
2.5 minutes. I don't want to start something new here, so let me cruise through Facebook and see who's there. Juanita Machi was once again #1. Let's give a big hand to Juanita Machi. And Brad Hood, as were Brad Wood, man after my own heart. Thank God it's Monday. Yeah. And Chris Biolacino, my Los Angeles Rams won the Super Bowl. Super Bowl?
My.
I'm such a sports fan. I heard that there was a Super Bowl today, but I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to it. Brennan Fausto, Jigo Jarhead watching. Good going, Jigo Jarhead. Semper Fi, man. And then Troy Torres, Buenas Tall Tales. And then we've got Pam Duvall. Happy Valentine's. Love your red shirt, Bob. And then Jose Martinez. Durham has stated in documents that Clinton paid someone to spy on Trump. It's a huge admission. And then Eric Raker says, squirrel?
It's a meme from a movie Up of a dog who gets distracted very easily when he sees a squirrel.
Okay.
I think he claims that this story is a squirrel, and I don't see that.
He could be nuts. Such analogies to squirrels. Okay, we got to go. Let's go, Brandon.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
First the U.S., now Germany. I'm Chris DeMeo, Fox News. Germany's leader heads to Russia this week to take a crack at resolving the Ukraine crisis.
Having seen President Biden in Washington last week, Germany's leader is heading east. Olaf Scholz visits Ukraine today and Russia tomorrow. He says he and other leaders are seeking to prevent a war in Europe as Russia masses troops near Ukraine. President Biden has insisted if Russia attacks, a new gas pipeline running from Russia to Germany will be blocked. In London, Simon Owen, Fox News.
Canadian truckers are continuing their protests against COVID-19 vaccine mandates this week.
For the first time in several weeks, we're hearing that there will be some movement by the truckers here in Ottawa, Canada. Now, the president of the Freedom Convoy has been speaking with Ottawa's mayor, and they came to an agreement that they'll move some of the trucks out of the residential areas around the capital city, but they will not be moving them from in front of Parliament. Now, with 4,000 demonstrators lining the streets here, police have been outnumbered, which has been a big issue. A third straight weekend of protests against COVID restrictions now continues, and Ottawa police have established a joint command center bringing in help from other agencies. The Freedom Convoy has at least 400 semi-trucks parked in front of Parliament. The group has been threatened with fines of up to 100,000 Canadian dollars and even jail time.
That's Fox's Alexis McAdams. The Los Angeles Rams topped the Cincinnati Bengals 23-20 to win the Super Bowl. It's LA's second Super Bowl win. Wide receiver Cooper Kupp was voted the game's most valuable player. Ivan Reitman, the filmmaker and producer behind Animal House and Ghostbusters, has died. Reitman was 75. His work also included such classics like Twins, Kindergarten Cop, and Beethoven. His family says Reitman died in his sleep on Saturday night. America's listening.